Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday live stream. Well, all February and March long, we've just been rolling out the content on OCS360, Horner's new cloud service. And it just can't get any easier to push data from PLC-type devices to the cloud than with OCS360. And that's true whether you're talking about machine data in factories, maybe municipal data for water systems, even agricultural data. It just doesn't get any easier. Okay, let's look at today's specific topic for OCS 360. Downloading data from OCS 360. Now, there's lots of reasons why you might want to download data, but let's just get right to it and break down today's topic. For today's breakdown, we're going to start, like we always do, with a one-slide review of OCS 360. Then we're going to get into today's topic. Why download your data? What can you do with the data once you've downloaded it? And how can you build a special dashboard in OCS 360 for historical data? And we'll have plenty of demonstrations throughout. But before we dive into this topic, we're going to bring in our regular guest for this series. Okay, so joining me once again is our OCS 360 guru, Don Clutterbuck. How are we doing today, Don?
Good. Looking forward to warmer weather. So.
You and me both, I tell you. Okay, so today we're talking about downloading data on demand. So I'm going to show the folks how to set up a special dashboard that specifically is geared towards, the data you're interested in downloading from, I guess, more of a longer term standpoint. Of course, there's lots of different ways you can do that. But the big question for today, aside of how to do that, is why do that? So what are your thoughts on that topic?
Well, there's a couple reasons, and data is going to be driving a lot of things in the future of automation, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do anything with artificial intelligence, you're just going to need tons of data. But more importantly, the more quicker way of looking at the data is the government's going to require you to keep track of data. Your customers are going to require you to keep track of some sort of data of the product that you're making, or internally, your quality manager, production manager is going to ask for data to improve the process, trackability, that sort of stuff. So data is the king.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned several different reasons there, and I can, as you mentioned each one of those, in my head, I thought of a different example of customer situations of exactly what you mentioned. I remember talking to a manufacturer who had just started manufacturing products for Ford. Now, their company had been around forever, manufacturing products for smaller companies, and they never had the data requirements that Ford was putting on them. So they were really having to look at how can we make sure that we're gathering the data and presenting it easily for the purposes that we need for this new supplier that has those requirements. Those are all reasons why that could happen. So
yeah, it's all about just start. What you've got to do is start small, get a few pieces of information, start logging it, and then you'll figure out we better add this piece or that piece. So by using OCS controllers and OCS 360, we give you a good way of collecting that data.
Yeah, and starting small and starting simple. That's really the big thing. You can't measure what you don't, you can't improve what you don't measure, right? And getting that data flow started is really what it's all about. Okay. All right. Thanks again, Don, for joining us this week. And we've got 3 more topics, I believe, yet in March for OCS 360. So you'll be back again.
Yes, every week.
All right, take care. Now for our quick one-slide review of OCS 360. What is OCS 360? Well, it's a new cloud service from Horner about the easiest way possible to push data from a PLC-like device, in this case the Horner OCS, to the cloud using a special free version of MQTT that's built into the Prime and the Canvas controllers and requires no extra licensing. With OCS 360, you get data recording for up to 5 years. dashboarding, and alarm annunciation and notification, and we have more features coming as it goes. And of course, OCS360 is free for the first 90 days, and we'll talk about that more later. Now for today's topic. First, why download data from OCS360? And this is really what we talked about with Don. Basically, you might have regulatory reasons for downloading a copy of your data. You might need to do some customer reports. They may want to have proof of your production process while you were manufacturing their components, for instance. You may need it for quality control programs, for production control reports and planning. And as we've talked about throughout the series, in the future, if you're going to be getting into artificial intelligence and especially machine learning, you're going to need lots of data, and OCS360 is the way to provide that. Now, what can you do with the data once you've downloaded it? Okay, well, there's a few different things, and we're going to show you today how you can load it into Excel for quick and simple charting and calculations, but you could also load it into a database. You could feed it into a report. We talked about the fact you may need to provide reports for regulatory purposes to the government or maybe to a customer. And of course, you can just take that data you've downloaded and then supply it as is in CSV format to your quality control department, your production control department, or feed it into a machine learning model, for instance. Now, if you're building a special dashboard for historical data, and that's what we're going to talk about today, a technique that you can follow in which you build a special dashboard where the data is ready to be downloaded at any time. Okay, now this is not a mandatory technique. Just about every widget you put up there that's dealing with historical data at all has the ability for the data to be downloaded from it. However, with a lot of those widgets you're putting on your dashboard, you may be interested in a shorter term time fence. Now, for downloading data and what we're talking about today, it may be a case where having a longer term time fence will allow you to get a bigger chunk of data that you can feed into those things that we talked about on the previous slide. So this is just a technique I'm going to show you. It's absolutely not mandatory in order to be able to download data from OCS360. Okay, now there are some keys to success as you're doing this, and we're going to demonstrate all this for you, but I just wanted to have a single slide where I could summarize it for you. First of all, you're going to want to use a time series line chart. That's probably the widget where it's easiest to deal with the longer term data. And when you're configuring that time series line chart, you're going to want to use advanced mode, not basic mode. You're going to want to use the widget time window, not the default of the dashboard time window. And you're going to want to set that time window to a long period of time, say 30 days or so. All right. And then from the widget card control, or tab, if you will, you're going to want to make sure as you scroll all the way down that enable widget data export has been enabled. So those are kind of the keys to success as you set up that special dashboard to make sure you have a long-term range of historical data that you can download with a single click. All right, let's go ahead and get right to the demonstration and show you how to set up this historical data dashboard and also how to use it. Okay, here we are at OCS360. So before we actually start building this special dashboard for historical data for downloading purposes, let's just reinforce the fact that you can actually download data from any widget where it's been set up to be downloaded from. So let me go here to my existing dashboard, which is process history, and take a look at this time series line chart that I created back during the dashboard series or the dashboard live stream. So as you can see here, we've got our pressure variable, we've got our temperature and our temperature set point, and we've been gathering data for quite a while now. But this particular chart only shows the last day because that's what I was interested in from this dashboard is I want to see what's going on today with the machine, for instance, or with the process. I don't necessarily want to look at this long time fence for the purposes of just checking to see how things are going today. So that was the purpose of creating this particular time series line chart. Now let's create one through a special dashboard that's really focused on historical data. So I'm going to go back to dashboards. I'm going to hit the plus button to create a new dashboard. Okay, I'm going to give it a name. Let's call it History for Downloads, for data downloads. All right, and we'll just leave it as is here. All right, let's hit the plus sign to add a new widget. Let's select from the charts bundle and the first chart in the list there, the time series line chart. Okay, now let's make sure we cover all those keys to success that I just talked about a little while ago. Okay, so advanced, we want advanced mode. We want to use the widget time window. Okay, all right, so those are two things we want to establish, and we want our time fence to be a longer time period. Okay, well, the previous chart I showed you was for the last day, I believe. This one, let's make sure that we have a much longer time series. Let's go ahead and select all the way out to 30 days. So that's our current maximum. Now, there's one more point that I didn't put on the keys to success slide that I want to review with you now, and that is this. There is a data aggregation function. So if you leave this at the default of average, you're not going to get every single piece of data that was pushed to OCS360. It's going to aggregate some of it, say into like 2-hour averages or something. So you'll still get a lot of data, but it won't be every single data point. So if you want every single data point, you need to change the data aggregation down here to none. All right, and then you can decide if you want to limit the size of that spreadsheet, to a certain number of values. You can do that here. But that's the other little key to success that I didn't talk about before. All right, so let's hit update here. All right, now let's start adding in the data points that we want to include in this time series line chart. Now, there's a couple different approaches you could take here. One approach would be, hey, let's put all the data we're interested in a single chart, okay? And then you'd have a single download, and then you can slice and dice it from there. Another approach might be, well, let's just build a series or several of these time series line charts, and then we can have it kind of pre-sorted by, the data that we're interested in different categories, if that's what makes sense for you. All right, so in my case, I'm going to put those same 3 variables on this particular time series data chart. So I've got to select my device, okay, which is my Epoxymatic. That's the OCS that's pushing data, and there could be several. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this default piece of data here, this default data key, and I'm going to select, let's start with temperature, okay? Let's get the temperature set point, and let's get the pressure, okay? So that's enough for this. So I've added this to the chart, okay? That looks good. Now let's go to our widget card, all right? I'm just going to do a little piece of housekeeping here to change the title. So I'm going to call this Historical Process Data. All right, and the key feature though, or key function here, is this is where I want to scroll down on the widget card and make sure I've enabled widget data export. That way I'll have a single button I can press to make that happen. Okay, now I'll hit add. Okay, and it's bringing in this data. All right, and as you can see, this data is, wow, there's a lot of data packed into this chart. So from looking at this chart, maybe this chart isn't all that useful in its current form just for viewing the data, but it's going to be really useful for downloading the data if we want to get all the data at least, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and hit save because that's the last step in the process. And when I hit save, that's when I get my export widget data button to appear. Okay, and that's going to give me the opportunity to press that anytime I want to download all of this data for the last 30 days. So let me go ahead and do that now. Okay, so it's downloaded the latest data. You can see I've done some previous downloading. All right, so now we've done that step. Now what can we do with the data? Well, we talked about that before. We can use it as is to send off to another department in CSV form if they want to, take it from there. We can use it to build reports. We can throw it in a database. There's lots we can do with it. I'm going to show you just real quick, a quick and dirty way to take this data and bring it into Excel, and then you can slice and dice and all those sorts of things from within that familiar tool. I'm going to start by minimizing our browser here. I've already got Excel open. Let's go ahead and do a file open. Here's the data we just downloaded. I'll hit the open button here. Okay, and let me drag that data over, and there we go. Okay, so there's our data. So let's spread out these columns a little bit so we can read them easily. I'll go a little further with that one. All right. And there we are. Okay, so you can see here's the data going all the way back to the middle of February. Okay, that's as far back as we could go and stay within our limit of 25,000 cells. Okay, so we got 25,000 cells here. Now, if I want to have more than that, so in this case, I wasn't able to go all the way back to, the previous 30 days. I was only able to go back to the previous, let's say 15 or 20 days based on the number of entries. I could raise the number of entries in my setting for that particular time series chart above 25,000 to get all the data there. I could also do some aggregating of the data. So I could have it do some averaging if I wanted to, if it was okay to take a look at the data, not seeing every single data point that was pushed, but to allow the chart to do some aggregating for me. So that would be another approach I could take. But anyway, I've got, effectively 2 or 3 weeks worth of data here. And if I wanted to quickly chart it, again, we kind of showed that when you have data of this amount, charting all of the data may not be that useful, but let's go ahead and just chart, let's say, some of it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and, I'll just chart, let's say this amount of data for quick demonstration purposes. So I'm highlighting the data that I'm interested in, and then I'm gonna go to insert. Now I'm working with a Mac, so it's slightly different than a PC, but the functions are gonna be the same. I'm gonna insert a chart. Let's make it a line chart. Okay, by default, it puts us in this kind of little tiny puny window here. I'm gonna see if I can move this and have a more effective, there we go, a more effective way of looking at this chart. I like to move it to a sheet so it's much larger. There we go. And now we've got the data for that time period that I highlighted with my 3 different pieces of data. All right, so that's just a quick down and dirty on what you can do with the data. One example of what you can do with the data, and that is, bring it into Excel and slice and dice and chart and that sort of thing. But of course, you could use this data for creating reports. You could use this data for sending directly to your quality control department or your process control department. They may have something in mind and they just want the raw data so they can take it from there. And in the future, you could also use it for AI purposes, to load it into a large machine learning type model, that sort of thing. Okay, so hopefully this was useful to you, showing you a technique to create a special dashboard with charts on it specifically geared towards downloading. That does it for our topic for today. And as I wrap up, I just want to remind you of the requirements for OCS360. You'll need Cscape 10.1 and firmware version 17.1 for your Canvas or XL Prime controller. Those are both available on the website. Of course, you'll need to make sure your OCS controller is connected to the internet or has access to the internet. Doesn't matter whether it's wired, whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's cellular, as long as it has access to the internet. And of course, you'll need an OCS360 subscription. We've got several plans available for you, silver, gold, and platinum. And the primary way in which they differ is in the amount of data per minute that each OCS controller is allowed to push to the cloud. For silver, it's 250 variables per minute. For gold, it's 500 variables per minute. And for platinum, it's 1,000 variables per minute. All right, we've got training at Horner, and our customers tell us that they love factory training. Our next course is actually next week. We've got an advanced course. I think we've got a couple slots available. If your schedule's opened up and you're ready to travel to Indianapolis, Indiana on a pretty short notice, then let us know and sign up for next week's course. If not, we've got plenty more courses available this year. Okay, we're going to be at several trade shows this year. There's the schedule. We'll be talking about those more as the dates get closer. But plan your travel now, either in May, August, or September, to come see us at one of these great national, and in the case of the Grand Rapids show, regional trade shows. Okay, lots of ways to interact with Horner, whether it's at our website of hornerautomation.com, from our YouTube channel, or from LinkedIn. Okay, as I mentioned in the open, February and March have been OCS 360 months, and we have 8 topics that we've been rolling through, and we've still got a couple left. So if you haven't managed to catch all of them, go back to our website, go to our YouTube channel, and get caught up. Next week, we're going to talk about user management in OCS 360. So a lot of our discussions have been about setting up OCS 360 as the tenant or administrator. But we're also going to be now talking next week about how you can set up additional users who can, monitor the data and maybe, receive notifications and things, but they're not necessarily the ones who are setting up the system. Okay, so that's next week's topic. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, don't hesitate to do so. It doesn't cost anything. And if you choose notifications, you'll be notified when we post a new video or when we go live. Okay, so until next week, when we talk about setting up additional users for OCS 360, let's all get out there and do some good.